Welcome to Starlight Sci-Fi, where the cosmos is our playground and every story is an adventure. Today we dive into a tale of cultural confusion and cosmic curiosity. Buckle up for you detained human kids. Oh Sweet Summer Alien, a story that shows just how differently species can see the world, or in this case, the playground. It was supposed to be a serene day in Recreation Sector 7. The meditation garden, renowned across the station for its tranquil atmosphere, was designed to offer peace and reflection. Sparkling mineral formations towered gracefully, their surfaces shimmering under the soft glow of ambient lights. Their intricate shapes were meant to inspire contemplation, their smooth curves a tribute to the art of stillness. But to 6 human children, the garden was an irresistible playground. The children, ranging from ages 6 to 11, were explorers at heart. Their eyes widened with excitement as they took in the glittering stones, the arches that seemed perfectly suited for swinging, and the narrow ledges that challenged their balance. It was a paradise of adventure waiting to be conquered. Without hesitation, they scrambled up the largest structure, their laughter echoing off the smooth walls. They moved with the confidence and agility only youth could muster, finding handholds where none seemed to exist. To them, it was a game, a quest to reach the highest point and claim victory over their imaginary obstacles. What they didn't know was that the mineral formations were sacred. The garden was designed for quiet meditation, not playful exploration. Security drones, programmed to safeguard the delicate structures, detected the unauthorized movement. Their sensors registered the vibrations caused by the climbing, triggering an automatic response. The drones hovered silently at first, observing the children's activity with unblinking red optics. When warnings went unheeded because the children couldn't understand the alien language, the drones moved to intervene. The first drone emitted a soft pulse, meant to deter any lifeform from touching the formations. The children merely giggled, feeling a mild tingling that they mistook for part of their game. One boy waved at the drone, his face lit with curiosity. But the drones were programmed for efficiency, not understanding. They calculated the risk to the sacred structures and moved swiftly to contain the situation. Energy fields enveloped the children, harmless yet firm, lifting them off the formations. The sensation was like being caught in a gentle breeze. And for a moment, the children were thrilled by the weightless experience. But excitement turned to confusion as they were carried away, their limbs suspended and unable to move. Their laughter faded, replaced by uneasy silence. They were taken through winding corridors, far from the familiar paths they knew, to a section of the station they had never seen before. They arrived at the juvenile detention facility, designed to be secure and functional. The room was sterile, the walls smooth and devoid of decoration. A faint hum of machinery filled the air. When the energy fields released them, the children stumbled but quickly regrouped, huddling close for comfort. They looked around, their faces a mixture of fear and curiosity. There were no toys, no windows, and no adults they recognized. It felt cold, mechanical, and entirely unfamiliar. To the security system, the situation was resolved. Unauthorized individuals had been removed from a restricted area, but the station's protocol classified them merely as juvenile specimens. There was no alert sent to their guardians, no consideration of their emotional state. As far as the system was concerned, they were safely contained. The door sealed shut, and the room's ambient lights dimmed to a level deemed restful for most species. 3 Earth days would pass before anyone outside these walls realized they were missing. The children were alone, isolated in a place that saw them not as vulnerable beings but as mere entities to be managed. They didn't yet understand that their playful adventure had just turned into a diplomatic crisis waiting to unfold. 3 Earth days passed within the walls of the juvenile detention facility, each hour stretching endlessly for the 6 human children. The room was cold and sterile, illuminated by a dim, ambient light that never changed. There were no windows, no way to tell if it was day or night. The only sound was the faint hum of machinery, a low, monotonous drone that offered no comfort. At first, the children were curious. They explored every corner of the room, tapping on the smooth walls, looking for seams or hidden doors. But the surfaces were flawless, designed to contain even the most resourceful of creatures. When they tried to speak to the walls, hoping for a response, the room remained silent. It was clear that no one was listening. Their restlessness grew. but there was no outlet for their energy. The room was devoid of toys, climbing structures, or even soft surfaces to sit on comfortably. It was designed with containment in mind, not comfort. The children's movements became sluggish as boredom set in. They began pacing the small space, their steps echoing in the hollow chamber. Hunger gnawed at them. They hadn't eaten since before they were detained, and their stomachs growled loudly in protest. Eventually, compartments opened in the walls, dispensing small cube-shaped rations. The children approached cautiously, their curiosity momentarily revived. The cubes were uniform in color, a pale gray with a faint, metallic sheen. They picked them up, sniffing hesitantly before taking a bite. The taste was awful. It was bland, with a texture like chalk. The cubes were nutrient-dense, designed to sustain life but not to satisfy a human palate. They were formulated for the dietary needs of various species on the station, but not for the tastes or requirements of growing human children. Despite their hunger, the children could barely force themselves to eat. They nibbled on the cubes, grimacing with each bite. It was enough to keep them from starving, but not enough to feel full or energized. As the hours turned to days, their spirits began to wane. The initial confusion and curiosity gave way to frustration and fear. They were accustomed to movement, play, and social interaction, but the room offered none of that. There was no space to run, no place to hide, no one to talk to but each other. Their games of pretend became dull, and their energy dwindled. They slept fitfully on the cold floor, huddling together for warmth and comfort. Their dreams were restless, filled with shadows and echoes of home. When they awoke, they were disoriented, unsure of how long they had been there. Time lost all meaning in the windowless room. The children grew pale and listless, their once bright eyes now dim with fatigue and confusion. Their questions grew louder in their minds. Where were their parents? Why had no one come to find them? They felt abandoned, left to navigate this cold, unfeeling place on their own. They didn't understand that their presence here was due to a cultural misunderstanding, that the station's administration saw them as specimens rather than children. Unseen and unheard, the security system continued its routine checks, ensuring that the juveniles were contained and safe by its standards. It didn't register their emotional distress or their growing anxiety. To the system, they were simply occupants in a holding cell, waiting to be processed. 3 days in that cold, sterile room felt like an eternity. The children's spirits were fading, and their hope was slipping away. They didn't know that outside those walls, a search was underway, that their parents were desperately looking for them. They were unaware that their disappearance was about to ignite a diplomatic crisis that would shake the station's administration to its core. Panic spread like wildfire through the human residential sector of the space station. 6 children were missing without a trace. At first, the parents assumed they were playing somewhere nearby, caught up in one of their adventurous games. But as the hours dragged on with no sign of them, worry turned to fear. The parents searched everywhere they could think of: play areas, common spaces, and even the less traveled maintenance corridors. They called out names until their voices were hoarse, their pleas echoing through empty halls. When the children still didn't turn up, the parents reported their disappearances to station security. But their concerns were met with confusion. The security personnel, unfamiliar with human customs and emotions, didn't understand the urgency. To them, the children were likely just wandering the recreational sectors, as many younglings from other species were known to do. The security log showed no anomalies, no recorded incidents or emergencies. There was no indication of an abduction or accident. Frustration grew as the parents demanded action. They were met with calm reassurances, but no real help. The security systems, designed to maintain order and safety, had no protocols for locating missing human children. There was no station-wide alert, no organized search effort. The parents were left to continue their desperate quest alone, their worry growing with each passing hour. They retraced their steps, searching every corner of the station again and again. They questioned neighbors, hoping for any clue or sighting, but no one had seen the children since they were last playing together. A heavy sense of dread settled over the community. The station, once a place of safety and exploration, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Exhausted and scared, the parents banded together, pooling their knowledge and resources. They shared theories, wondering if the children had gotten lost in the maze-like corridors or ventured into restricted areas. They organized search parties, coordinating shifts so that no place was left unchecked. But no matter how hard they looked, the children remained missing. As despair threatened to overwhelm them, the parents' fear hardened into determination. They were not going to give up. They sought help from the only person they believed could make a difference, Diplomatic Officer Winters, the human representative on the station. Known for his understanding of interspecies relations, Winters was their best hope of cutting through the bureaucracy and getting answers. Winters took their concerns seriously, immediately launching an investigation. He scoured communication logs, reviewed surveillance footage, and questioned station personnel. His diplomatic rank granted him access to restricted information, but even then he was met with dead ends. The children seemed to have vanished without a trace. But Winters refused to accept that they were simply gone. He knew the station's systems were comprehensive, monitoring every corner for security purposes. It was only a matter of finding the right footage. Finally, after hours of searching, he found it. The surveillance feed from Recreation Sector 7 showed the children laughing and playing in the meditation garden, climbing the mineral formations with fearless joy. But the joy was short-lived. The footage revealed the security drones moving in, surrounding the children. The drones' metallic limbs reached out and energy fields enveloped the young explorers, lifting them off the rocks and carrying them away. Winters watched in disbelief as the children were escorted through corridors, their faces shifting from excitement to confusion. The video ended with the children disappearing into the juvenile detention facility, the door sealing behind them. Winters realized the horrifying truth: they hadn't been lost. They had been detained, considered nothing more than juvenile specimens violating station rules. He understood the gravity of the situation. The children were not criminals, they were just playing, behaving as human children naturally would. The station's protocols had failed to account for the cultural differences between species. With growing urgency, Winters prepared to confront Chief Administrator Zix, the one responsible for enforcing station security protocols. He knew that explaining the human perspective would be challenging. Zix's species viewed younglings as quiet, obedient creatures who meditated peacefully when confined. The concept of restless, playful human children would be foreign to him. Winters also realized that time was running out. The parents were growing desperate, and the children had already been isolated for 3 Earth days. He needed to act fast before the situation escalated into an interspecies diplomatic crisis. The truth was out, but the battle to bring the children home had only just begun. Diplomatic Officer Winters moved swiftly through the polished corridors of the station, his mind racing with urgency. The surveillance footage was clear: 6 human children had been detained, treated as mere specimens, and left isolated for 3 days without any contact with their parents. He could hardly believe the magnitude of the oversight. Yet he knew this was more than just a bureaucratic blunder. It was a cultural misunderstanding on a massive scale. Winters reached the administrative wing, his access clearance allowing him to bypass the security barriers that guarded the heart of the station's governance. The air was cooler here, sterile and efficient, reflecting the mindset of those who operated within these walls. He marched directly to the office of Chief Administrator Zix, the one responsible for enforcing station protocols. Winters knew that Zix was meticulous, dedicated to maintaining order, but he also understood that Zix's knowledge of human culture was limited. Inside the office, Zix stood amidst holographic displays, each one filled with data feeds and security logs. His tall, slender form radiated a sense of calm and precision, his movements deliberate and controlled. To his species, rules were absolute, their society built on order and quiet discipline. Younglings were raised to be still and contemplative, spending their early years in quiet meditation. The concept of playful, energetic human children was utterly foreign to him. Winters presented the evidence, laying out the timeline of events in meticulous detail. He showed the footage of the children playing in the meditation garden, their laughter and curiosity evident in every movement. Zix's expression remained neutral as he watched the security drones intervene, calmly enforcing the protocols designed to protect the sacred mineral formations. In his eyes, the children's behavior was disorderly, disruptive, a clear violation of the space's intended purpose. Zix listened intently as Winters explained the nature of human childhood, the need for exploration, the instinct to climb and play as a means of learning and growth. He described how human children were encouraged to test their limits, to be bold and adventurous, all under the watchful eyes of protective guardians. He emphasized how critical social interaction, play, and proper nutrition were to their well-being. Confusion flickered across Zix's features. His species' younglings required calm environments, thriving in solitude and meditation. He had assumed all juvenile beings followed similar patterns. To him, the detention facility was a safe, neutral space, providing shelter and sustenance according to standard juvenile protocols. It had never occurred to him that humans would view it as cold, isolating, and neglectful. Winters pressed on, his words measured but firm. He detailed the emotional distress experienced by the children and the growing panic among the human parents. The absence of communication had violated a fundamental trust, leading to fear and desperation. He stressed that human parents were deeply protective, their bonds driven by a fierce instinct to safeguard their young. The thought of their children detained without knowledge of their whereabouts was unimaginable, bordering on cruel. Realization began to dawn on Zix. He saw now that the protocols, while logical and efficient, were not designed with human needs in mind. The system had categorized the children as juvenile entities, but it had failed to recognize them as vulnerable beings requiring specific care and compassion. What his species considered adequate solitude, nutrient cubes, and containment were in fact deeply distressing for human children. A sense of responsibility settled heavily on Zix's shoulders. He recognized the unintended consequences of his decisions, the harm caused by his ignorance of human customs. He understood that the situation had escalated beyond a simple policy breach. It was now a diplomatic crisis, one that threatened the delicate harmony between species on the station. Winters watched as Zix's posture shifted, his rigid stance softening. There was no time for debate. They needed to act quickly to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. Winters urged Zix to authorize the immediate release of the children and to notify the parents without delay. But even as Zix began issuing commands to his subordinates, Winters felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. He knew the damage couldn't be undone with a simple release order. Trust had been broken, and fear had taken root. The human parents were angry, their faith in the station's safety shattered. It would take more than apologies to repair the emotional wounds inflicted by this ordeal. Winters was certain that they were heading into a diplomatic firestorm, one that would test the strength of interspecies relations. As the orders were relayed and security personnel moved to free the children, Winters prepared himself for the next challenge facing the parents, explaining the cultural misunderstanding, and somehow convincing them that this was a lesson learned, not a betrayal. But deep down, he worried that no words would be enough to mend the hearts of parents who believed they had lost their children. The moment the detention facility doors slid open, the 6 children stumbled out, their eyes squinting against the brighter light of the hallway. Their faces were pale, their hair disheveled, and their movements sluggish from days of confinement. But as soon as they saw their parents rushing toward them, their expressions changed. Confusion gave way to relief, and then to tears. They ran into the open arms of their families, clinging tightly, as if afraid they might be taken away again. The reunion was both joyous and heart-wrenching. Parents wept openly, their relief palpable as they held their children close, checking them over for injuries and wiping away tears. They asked questions, their voices trembling, but the children were too exhausted to explain. They simply buried their faces into the familiar warmth of their parents' shoulders, seeking the comfort they had been denied for what felt like an eternity. The hallway filled with murmurs and cries, echoing off the metallic walls. The other station residents watched from a distance, their expressions a mix of sympathy and curiosity. News of the children's disappearance and subsequent detention had spread rapidly, igniting concern and confusion among the diverse species living on the station. Most couldn't understand why the humans were so emotional. To them, the children were merely relocated for their own safety. But to the human parents, they had been lost abducted by an uncaring system. Diplomatic Officer Winters stood nearby, his heart heavy as he observed the emotional aftermath. He had anticipated anger, but nothing could have prepared him for the depth of pain etched on the parents' faces. They were furious, and rightfully so. To them, the station had failed in its most fundamental duty to protect its youngest residents. Chief Administrator Zix watched in stunned silence, his composure faltering as he witnessed the raw display of human emotion. His species did not grieve or rejoice so openly, and he was unaccustomed to the intensity of parental bonds among humans. He began to realize the magnitude of his misjudgment. The protocols he had trusted were not merely inadequate. They had caused deep emotional harm. The parents' anger quickly turned outward. They demanded explanations, their voices sharp and accusatory. How could their children be detained without notification? How could they be left alone, hungry and afraid? Why hadn't anyone searched for them? The questions came in rapid succession, each one laced with bitterness and disbelief. Winters stepped forward, trying to calm the escalating tension. He explained the cultural misunderstanding, detailing how the station's juvenile protocols were designed for species whose younglings were quiet and self-sufficient. He assured the parents that the detention was not malicious but born of ignorance. Yet his words felt hollow in the face of their anguish. They wanted accountability, not excuses. Zix took a step forward, his posture rigid as he admitted his oversight. He explained that he had followed standard procedures, unaware of human needs. In his mind, the children were safe confined, fed, and secure. It had never occurred to him that they would suffer from isolation or inadequate nutrition. But his explanation did little to quell the parents' fury. To them, ignorance was no justification for neglect. Tensions continued to rise, the hallway crackling with anger and hurt. Winters knew they were at a critical juncture. If they couldn't bridge the cultural gap, the incident could escalate into a diplomatic crisis. He proposed an immediate review of station protocols, promising that changes would be made to prevent future misunderstandings. He vowed to ensure that human needs would be considered in every aspect of the station's governance. Zix agreed, acknowledging the need for change. He authorized a formal investigation into the incident and pledged compensation to the affected families. But his attempts at reconciliation were met with cold stares. The parents weren't interested in compensation, they wanted assurance that this would never happen again. They demanded better safeguards, better communication, and a fundamental change in how the station viewed human children. The children clung to their parents, their eyes wide with lingering fear. They didn't fully understand the political implications, but they sensed the tension. They were back with their families, but they weren't safe yet. The emotional wounds ran deep, and the trust that once existed between the human community and the station's administration was shattered. Winters saw the divide widening, and he knew that words alone would not be enough to repair the damage. The parents had experienced a nightmare they wouldn't soon forget. Even with the children back in their arms, the trauma remained, an invisible scar that would take time to heal. And as the families walked away, their children held close. Winters realized the hardest part was yet to come, rebuilding trust and ensuring that no human child would ever face this ordeal again. The incident sparked a wave of outrage that rippled through the human community on the station. Parents who had once felt secure now questioned everything about their surroundings. They no longer saw the station as a place of opportunity and exploration, but as a hostile environment that had endangered their children. Fear quickly turned into anger, and their demands for justice grew louder by the hour. Diplomatic Officer Winters knew the situation was volatile. He convened an emergency meeting, bringing together station administrators, security personnel, and representatives of the human community. The room was tense, filled with a charged silence that felt ready to explode. Human parents stood with their arms crossed, their faces etched with anger and distrust, while station officials looked uncomfortable, unsure how to navigate the emotional storm. Winters presented the facts with measured precision, recounting every detail of the incident, from the children's playful climbing in Recreation Sector 7 to their detention in the juvenile facility. He emphasized the cultural misunderstanding at the heart of the crisis, how the station's protocols were designed with other species in mind, species whose younglings required solitude and containment, not social interaction or physical activity. He explained how this fundamental gap in understanding had led to the children's isolation and suffering. Chief Administrator Zix listened intently, his posture rigid. He recognized his role in the debacle, but struggled to grasp the depth of the human parent's emotional response. To his species, younglings were left in meditative solitude for days without concern. It was a standard practice for developing discipline and resilience, but as he observed the pain and anger radiating from the parents, he began to see how profoundly he had misjudged human needs. The parents spoke one by one, their voices quivering with emotion. They described the agony of not knowing where their children were, the sleepless nights, the frantic searches. They spoke of the horror of discovering that their children had been detained without food, exercise, or comfort. Their words were raw, cutting through the room's sterile formality. They demanded accountability, and they demanded change. Winters turned to Zix, urging him to respond. Zix hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He admitted his ignorance and acknowledged that his adherence to protocol had caused unnecessary pain. He apologized, his voice unsteady as he expressed his regret. But his apology wasn't enough. The parents wanted more than words. They wanted concrete actions to ensure that no child would ever face such mistreatment again. Winters proposed a series of reforms designed to bridge the cultural gap. First, the immediate overhaul of the station's juvenile detention protocols, ensuring that human children would never be isolated or deprived of social interaction and physical activity. Second, mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all station personnel, including security forces, to educate them about human child rearing practices. Third, the installation of new communication systems that would alert parents immediately if their children were detained for any reason. The parents listened, their expressions softening as they heard Winters' commitment to change. But they remained skeptical. They had been blindsided once. They weren't going to be placated by promises alone. They demanded transparency, requesting a human oversight committee to monitor the implementation of these new policies. They wanted a voice in the decision-making process to ensure their children's safety was never compromised again. Zix agreed to the demands, recognizing that trust had been shattered and that rebuilding it would require more than policy changes. He approved the creation of the Oversight Committee, granting them full access to station records and decision-making forums. It was an unprecedented move, one that would change the balance of power within the station's administration. But Zix understood that it was necessary to restore harmony and maintain diplomatic relations. Winters knew the concessions were only the first step. To truly repair the damage, the station needed to demonstrate its commitment through action. He proposed modifying the meditation garden, where the incident had occurred, transforming it into a hybrid space, part tranquil sanctuary, part adventure playground. It would serve as a safe, supervised area where human children could explore and play without risking another misunderstanding. Zix agreed to the redesign, recognizing the need to accommodate the diverse needs of all residents. He ordered his engineers to begin construction immediately, ensuring the climbing area would be structurally sound and safe for human children. The transformation of the garden would be a symbol of the station's willingness to learn and adapt. The meeting ended with an uneasy truce. The parents were not yet ready to forgive, but they were willing to wait and see if the station would follow through on its promises. Winters watched them file out of the room, their faces still marked by worry and exhaustion, but with a flicker of hope in their eyes. They wanted to believe that change was possible, that the nightmare their children endured would never be repeated. But even as Winters felt a measure of relief, he knew the hardest challenges lay ahead. Implementing the reforms would require navigating layers of bureaucracy and overcoming cultural resistance. And more importantly, the emotional wounds were still fresh. Rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and unwavering commitment. Winters understood that this incident would leave a lasting impact, reshaping the station's policies and interspecies relations for years to come. The station's transformation began almost immediately. Engineers and designers descended upon Recreation Sector 7, dismantling the restrictive barriers around the meditation garden. The mineral formations that once stood as sacred symbols of tranquility were now being integrated into a new playground, a space where children could explore safely and freely. It was an unprecedented blend of cultural preservation and adaptation, a testament to the station's commitment to change. Construction moved swiftly, overseen by both station architects and human volunteers. Parents watched closely, ensuring the new design met the needs of their energetic children. The climbing structures were reinforced for safety, with soft landing pads and secure handholds. Pathways were widened, allowing adults to supervise easily, and communication panels were installed, linking the playground to the station's security network. It was more than just a playground. It was a symbol of reconciliation and progress. As the playground took shape, cultural sensitivity training began for all station personnel. Security officers attended seminars on human childhood development, learning about play as a fundamental part of learning and growth. They watched videos of human playgrounds on Earth, observing how children interacted climbing, running, laughing. For species accustomed to quiet contemplation, the scenes were almost chaotic. But they began to understand that this was normal for humans, a necessary expression of curiosity and exploration. Chief Administrator Zix participated in the training sessions, listening carefully and asking questions. He immersed himself in human literature, studying their philosophies on childhood, community, and emotional bonds. It was a steep learning curve, but he was determined to bridge the cultural gap. He realized that maintaining harmony required more than just rule enforcement, it required empathy and understanding. The new protocols were implemented station-wide, with clear guidelines on handling human children. In the event of any safety incident, parents would be notified immediately, and children would be supervised by personnel trained in human caregiving practices. The juvenile detention center was repurposed entirely, no longer a place of confinement but a safe space designed for temporary care, equipped with toys, educational materials, and ample room for play. The Human Oversight Committee met regularly with Zix, reviewing the progress and ensuring transparency. They were given full access to incident reports, surveillance footage, and administrative decisions. The committee included parents, educators, and cultural experts who provided continuous feedback, refining the protocols as they observed their impact in real time. It was a new era of collaborative governance, fostering trust through open communication. Meanwhile, the children began to recover from their ordeal. They were resilient, their spirits bouncing back as they returned to their routines. But traces of the experience lingered. They were more cautious, staying closer to their parents and asking more questions about safety and rules. Their parents watched them closely, protective and vigilant, their fear slowly giving way to cautious hope. When the playground was finally completed, the station held a grand reopening ceremony. Diplomats from multiple species attended, standing side by side with human families. Zix gave a speech, acknowledging his mistakes and expressing his commitment to continued cultural learning. Winter spoke about the importance of unity and understanding, his words carrying a message of healing and growth. Then the gates were opened, and the children rushed in, their laughter echoing through the garden. They climbed the mineral formations with joyous abandon, their energy infectious. The parents watched nervously at first, but as they saw the security personnel standing watchful yet relaxed, they began to smile. Their children were safe, free to explore without fear. The new playground quickly became a symbol of interspecies harmony. It wasn't just a space for children, it became a gathering place for all residents, a reminder of the importance of cultural exchange. Human parents shared stories with other species, explaining the significance of play in human development. In turn, they learned about other cultural practices, gaining a deeper appreciation for the station's diverse community. Yet, even as life returned to normal, the memory of the incident remained. The parents couldn't forget the fear and uncertainty, the nights spent wondering if they would ever see their children again. Winters knew that trust wasn't fully restored, but he was encouraged by the progress. Each day brought small victories, a shared laugh, a play date between species, a conversation sparked by curiosity rather than fear. The incident had reshaped the station, leading to reforms that would impact future generations. It served as a reminder that cultural differences were not merely challenges but opportunities for growth. Winters continued his work, ensuring that the hard-earned lessons weren't forgotten. He knew that vigilance was necessary to maintain the fragile peace, but he was optimistic. As the sun set over the playground, casting golden light over the laughing children, Winters allowed himself a moment of relief. The nightmare was over, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The station was no longer just a hub of interstellar commerce and diplomacy. It was a home, a place where all species could live, learn, and grow together. Yet he remained watchful. This was just the beginning. The journey toward understanding and unity was far from over, and new challenges would inevitably arise. But for now, as the laughter of human children mingled with the curious murmurs of other species, Winters felt a renewed sense of hope. They had turned a crisis into an opportunity for change, proving that even the deepest divides could be bridged with empathy, patience, and courage. Thank you for joining us on this cosmic journey. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more science fiction adventures. This has been Starlight Sci-Fi, where the universe is filled with stories waiting to be told. Until next time, keep looking to the stars.